I'm going to recommend Trey Gowdy be one of the folks that I would have a strong recommendation for him serving on the Supreme Court. I hope that the president will be open to that. A guy who will call balls and strikes and not choose a side, even when he's an elected member at this time in our nation's history, that's hard to find.
President Trump's apparent shortlist for the next Supreme Court justice getting even shorter. The president tweeting shortly ago, "I interviewed 4 very impressive people yesterday. On Monday, I will be announcing my decision for the justice on the U.S. Supreme Court."
And that list, it started with 25, now down to just a handful. Joining us now is Harvard law professor and constitutional law expert Alan Dershowitz. He's also the author of the book, The Case Against Impeaching Trump. Professor, thank you very much for joining us this morning. What is the president looking for the most in these final candidates?
Well, the president makes these kinds of decisions based on his personal interaction with the individuals more than recommendations. Obviously, he's going to take into account the recommendations as well. I hope he's looking for a libertarian conservative, a true conservative who elevates the rights of individual over the power of government. A true conservative also respects precedent, doesn't come to the court with an agenda, with a list of issues that he wants to see changed. A true conservative is not a judicial activist. So I think he can broaden his base, help unite the country, if he picks a true conservative who really believes in liberty and who believes in precedent. That's what true conservatism is on the bench.
And of course, Professor, the president and his supporters have also made it very clear he needs somebody who's a constitutionalist, somebody who looks at the Constitution and doesn't just make it up according to how they feel about the issue. And
that's absolutely right.
One of the names that has been floated, and apparently he met with Judge Amy Barrett yesterday from the 7th Court. She was a clerk for Scalia, a brilliant legal mind, but apparently a lot of top Democrats don't like her because she is very religious, and they think she would be somebody to undo Roe v. Wade. And so that's their play. They're going to block anybody who they think the president wants because that's ultimately his end game.
Well, you know, the Constitution says that no religious test shall ever be required for any office under the United States. It would be unconstitutional and immoral to take into account negatively a person's religious views. Let's remember that back in the bad old days, when the liberal United States Supreme Court upheld a statute mandatorily sterilizing mentally challenged people, the only dissent came from a religious Catholic whose religious views wouldn't allow him to accept mandatory sterilization. So true conservatives who oppose overreaching by the state can serve the interests of all Americans. I don't know this particular candidate, so I'm not going to comment on her, but I would just say that in any way disqualifying somebody for their religious views. Now, it's different if they say they're going to impose their religious views on the rest of the country. A person should be entitled to practice their religion freely, but the Constitution is not religious in nature. It separates church and state. It calls for freedom of religion. And so the proper role of religion is in personal decisions, not in decisions by a justice.
Briefly, last question. Do you expect this president to stick to the list that he released before?
He's always one who can come up with surprises. For example, Senator Lee of Utah may not be on the short list, but a lot of people think that he would be a superb justice because he has experience both in law and in politics. There are others who are on the big list but not on the short list. Don't be surprised if the president deviates from the short list and comes up with a name that has not been mostly debated in the media. But look, he's interviewing people. He's not going to pick somebody who he hasn't interviewed. So if we know who he interviews, we'll know what the list looks like.
Thank you, Professor. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Russia investigation has been going on for almost 2 years now. Special counsel's investigation has been going on for over a year now. For most Americans, it's important to know what Russia did to our country in 2016 and with whom, if anyone, they did it. When a foreign state interferes with our democratic electoral process, it should be a chance of a lifetime for a law enforcement agent to investigate that, except apparently the one that was actually picked to investigate it. That was Peter Strzok. FBI agent Peter Strzok was picked to lead the FBI's investigation into what Russia did in July of 2016. It was a counterintelligence investigation begun in late July 2016, and he was leading it. And at about the exact same time he was picked to lead it, this dispassionate and fair FBI agent was calling Trump a disaster, destabilizing for the country. I'll leave out all the adjectives he used to describe that. I'll just go with disaster and destabilizing. Same time, his FBI lawyer girlfriend, Lisa Page, was telling him he was meant to protect the country. This neutral, dispassionate FBI agent said, I can protect the country at many levels. Same time, Peter Strzok, who was picked to objectively, fairly, neutrally look into the Russia investigation, was talking about an insurance policy with Andy McCabe and Lisa Page in the event Donald Trump became the president. All of this was happening at the same time Peter Strzok said he could smell the Trump support in Southern Virginia. All this was at the same time that this FBI agent said a Trump presidency would be effing terrifying and that it will never happen. No, we'll stop it. So while investigating Russia and their attempt to subvert our democracy may have been important to the rest of the country, it wasn't all that important to about a half dozen FBI agents and lawyers who were assigned to the case. For them, it was an investigation to stop Donald Trump, which then brings us to May of 2017 and the appointment of special counsel, where we find Peter Strzok again, this same supposed to be dispassionate, neutral, fair FBI agent. You would think he'd be really excited about investigating what a foreign power tried to do to this country, but you would be wrong again for Peter Strzok at precisely the same time that Bob Mueller was appointed, precisely the same time. Peter Strzok was talking about his unfinished business and how he needed to fix and finish it so Donald Trump did not become president. He was talking about impeachment within 3 days of special counsel Mueller being appointed. 3 days. That's even quicker than MSNBC and the Democrats were talking about impeaching him. Within 3 days, the lead FBI agent is talking about impeaching the president. So this is where we are. We're 2 years into this investigation. We're a year and a half into the presidency. We're over a year into special counsel. You have a counterintelligence investigation that's become public. You have a criminal investigation that's become political. You have more bias than I have ever seen manifest in a law enforcement officer in the 20 years I used to do it for a living. And 4 other DOJ employees who had manifest animus towards the person they were supposed to be neutrally and detachedly investigating. Democrats are using this investigation as a presumption of guilt, which I find astonishing. And in the long run, for the health of this republic, I would encourage them to go back to the presumption of innocence that we used to hold sacred. There's a presumption of guilt. There's a desire by Democrat senators to fundraise off of your investigation. More than 60 Democrats have already voted to proceed with impeachment before Bob Mueller has found a single solitary damn thing. More than 60 have voted to move forward with impeachment, and he hasn't presented his first finding. So I'm going to say this to you, Mr. Ray, Mr. Rosenstein. I realize that neither one of you were there when this happened, but you're both there now. Russia attacked this country. They should be the target, but Russia isn't being hurt by this investigation right now. We are. This country is being hurt by it. We are being divided. We've seen the bias. We've seen the bias. We need to see the evidence. If you have evidence of wrongdoing by any member of the Trump campaign, present it to the damn grand jury. If you have evidence that this president acted inappropriately, present it to the American people. There's an old saying that justice delayed is justice denied. I think right now all of us are being denied. Whatever you got, finish it the hell up, because this country is being torn apart. I would yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Either of the witnesses care to respond to the...
Well, I would simply respond, Ms. Gowdy. I certainly share your views about those text messages, and nobody is more offended than I about what's reflected in those messages. With regard to the investigation, I've heard suggestions that we should just close the investigation. I think the best thing we can do is finish it appropriately and reach a conclusion. And I certainly agree with you, sir, that people should not jump to conclusions without seeing the evidence. I've been the victim of fake news attacks myself, so I'm sympathetic. I agree with you, sir, that there's been no allegation made by the Department of Justice or the special counsel other than what's reflected in those documents that are filed publicly, the charged folks. And nobody should draw any conclusions beyond those charges.